When the P-38 Lightning first entered the Pacific skies, Japanese pilots didn't quite know what to make of it. With its twin-boom design, blistering speed, and heavy firepower, the aircraft looked more like science fiction than a fighter. To Japan's airmen, the P-38 was an unwelcome surprise, fast, lethal, and utterly unlike anything they had faced before. It quickly earned a reputation as the American fighter Japan never wanted to encounter. When the P-38 Lightning first appeared in the Pacific theater, Japanese pilots were baffled. Its strange twin-boom layout looked alien compared to the sleek, single-fuselage fighters they were accustomed to. Some mistook it for a bomber escort or reconnaissance plane, underestimating its true purpose. That miscalculation proved costly. The Lightning was not a support aircraft, it was a predator. Powered by twin Allison engines with turbo superchargers, the Lightning climbed with relentless strength and dived with terrifying speed. Japanese pilots, accustomed to graceful turning duels in their agile Zeros, suddenly faced an aircraft that refused to play by the same rules. Instead of engaging in tight circles, the P-38 struck from above, dove through formations with its nose-mounted guns blazing, and then streaked away before anyone could react. Its nose armament, 4.50 caliber machine guns and a 20mm cannon, gave it unmatched lethality. Unlike wing-mounted weapons that required converging fire, every round fired straight ahead, converging perfectly on target no matter the range. Japanese fighters, lightly built and fragile, often disintegrated after just a few hits. To pilots who prided themselves on precision and agility, it was devastating to face an opponent that killed so efficiently. Another shock was its endurance. The P-38 had the range to escort bombers deep into contested skies. Raids, once vulnerable to interception, now arrived with deadly guardians, able to remain in the fight far longer than Japanese interceptors with limited fuel reserves. Even over their own airfields, Japanese pilots found no sanctuary. The Lightning hunted them wherever they flew. The first sightings left an indelible impression. Reports described a machine that seemed impervious to familiar tactics. It was fast, powerful, heavily armed, and able to dictate every engagement. In one stroke, Japan's doctrine of outturning and outmaneuvering the enemy was rendered obsolete. The twin-boom Predator had arrived, and it would haunt Japanese skies for the rest of the war. For years, Japanese air superiority rested on a clear doctrine: agility and maneuver warfare. Fighters like the Mitsubishi A6M0 embodied this philosophy: lightweight, nimble, and deadly in turning duels. Against early Allied aircraft, the formula worked. Heavier planes fell victim to the Zero's ability to dance through the skies, but the arrival of the P-38 Lightning exposed how fragile this strategy truly was. The Lightning did not seek turning fights. Instead, it leveraged speed, climb, and firepower to control every engagement. With turbo superchargers, it could fight effectively above 30,000 feet, altitudes that left Japanese engines gasping and pilots struggling with frozen guns or oxygen deprivation. Suddenly, Japanese fighters could not even reach the same battlefield. The Lightning dictated when battles began and when they ended. Range dealt another blow to Japan's doctrine. Zeros and Ki-43 Hayabusas had limited endurance, tying them to defensive perimeters. 38 broke that barrier. With over 1,000 miles of reach, it escorted bombers far beyond Japan's expectations. Raids no longer ended at the edge of zero range. Bombers pressed deeper, always shielded by Lightnings ready to pounce. Japan's once reliable ambushes turned into massacres. The concentrated firepower of the Lightning also shattered Japanese design choices. Built without armor and with unprotected fuel tanks, Japan's fighters could not withstand the P-38's nose-mounted barrage. Bursts of heavy machine gun and cannon fire tore wings apart, ignited fuel, and left little chance of survival. Maneuvering skill and bravery could not compensate for structural vulnerability. Commanders quickly realized that their doctrine had met a nightmare. The tactics that had defined Japanese air victories in 1941 and 1942 no longer applied in 1943. The Lightning had rewritten the rules of aerial warfare, and Japan was unprepared. Every encounter hammered home the same truth. Their philosophy of lightweight agility had been outclassed by speed, firepower, and endurance. The nightmare was no longer theoretical, it was flying in their skies every day. From a Japanese perspective, the P-38's technical capabilities seemed almost unreal. Most fighters they encountered were incremental improvements, slightly faster, slightly tougher. The Lightning was something else entirely. Its twin Allison V1710 engines with turbo superchargers gave it unmatched performance. It cruised at speeds over 400 miles per hour, climbed past 30,000 feet with ease, and operated where Japanese interceptors faltered. At altitude, the advantage was overwhelming. Japanese pilots who managed to climb high enough often arrived with overheated engines, low fuel, and reduced maneuverability. Meanwhile, the P-38 retained full combat capability, circling above like a hawk waiting to strike. It could choose the moment to attack and disengage without risk, something Japan's aircraft simply could not counter. Range was another revelation. With external fuel tanks, the Lightning could escort bombers across vast stretches of ocean. Japan's geography, once a defensive advantage, collapsed. Industrial centers, naval bases, and even distant convoys suddenly lay within striking distance. Pilots realized that nowhere was safe once the Lightning took to the skies. Its firepower was equally shocking. 4 heavy machine guns and a 20mm cannon, all mounted in the nose, created a focused, devastating stream of fire. Unlike dispersed wing-mounted armaments, this arrangement delivered accuracy at any distance. Japanese fighters, designed for agility over durability, were shredded by short bursts. Even bombers, previously requiring coordinated attacks, could be downed in seconds. The Lightning's survivability added insult to injury. Armor protection, self-sealing tanks, and robust construction gave its pilots a margin of safety their Japanese counterparts lacked. Where a Zero would ignite from a few bullets, a P-38 could absorb damage and return to base. For Japanese commanders, the technical shock was profound. The Lightning represented a leap, not an evolution, a machine designed from the ground up to dominate. Its speed, firepower, and endurance showed what American industry could achieve, and it left Japan's pilots with a grim realization. They were no longer fighting on equal terms. The true measure of the P-38 Lightning came in combat. Early in the Pacific Campaign, Japanese pilots dismissed it as an oversized curiosity. That illusion evaporated quickly. By late 1942, P-38s were tangling with Zeros over the Solomon Islands, escorting bombers and sweeping Japanese bases. Pilots who expected a lumbering target instead found themselves hunted by a predator that dictated the rules of engagement. The Lightning excelled in boom and zoom tactics, diving from altitude, blasting enemy formations with concentrated fire, and climbing back out before Japanese fighters could respond. These hit-and-run strikes negated Japan's traditional reliance on tight-turning dogfights. A Zero might outmaneuver a P-38 in a turning circle, but the Lightning rarely gave its enemies that chance. Instead, it attacked on its own terms, exploiting superior speed, climb, and firepower. Japanese reports soon reflected frustration. Pilots wrote of P-38s appearing suddenly from high altitude, striking with devastating accuracy and disappearing before counterattacks could be organized. Interceptors often found themselves climbing desperately, engines overheating, only to arrive too late. The Lightning's range also meant it appeared in unexpected places, raiding supply lines, ambushing reconnaissance planes, and relentlessly escorting bombers over strategic targets. Perhaps the most demoralizing encounters came when Japanese formations tried to swarm Allied bombers. Before the P-38, Zeros and Ki-43s could pounce on unescorted raids, shredding slow-moving aircraft with coordinated attacks. With Lightnings present, that equation collapsed. Their nose-mounted guns tore through interceptors before they reached bomber formations. Allied crews felt the difference immediately, reporting safer missions and fewer losses. For Japanese defenders, every battle underscored the same bitter truth. The Lightning neutralized their strengths and exploited their weaknesses. Losses mounted, squadrons dwindled, and morale sank. To the Japanese pilot forced into combat against the P-38, the fight often felt hopeless, a duel where survival was the best outcome. The Lightning had proven itself not just as a fighter, but as a relentless executioner of Japan's air strategy. Faced with the P-38's dominance, Japan scrambled for solutions. Engineers rushed to adapt interceptors like the Ki-44 Shoki and Ki-84 Hayate, stripping weight and boosting engines to compete at high altitude. While these aircraft showed promise, shortages of fuel and trained pilots crippled their effectiveness. Few could match the Lightning's performance for long, and attrition whittled away Japan's already fragile squadrons. Desperation led to extreme measures. One grim tactic ordered was Tai-Atari deliberate ramming attacks. Pilots were instructed to crash into P-38s or their bomber charges if firepower failed. Accounts describe young aviators turning their fragile fighters into human missiles, often perishing without even damaging their targets. While these acts of sacrifice demonstrated Japan's resolve, they did little to alter the balance of power. Losses from self-destruction only accelerated the depletion of Japan's air corps. Japan also experimented with night interceptions, modifying aircraft like the J-1N-1 Gecko with primitive radar and upward-firing cannons. The idea was to ambush P-38s and bombers under the cover of darkness, when Allied formations might be more vulnerable. Though a handful of successes were reported, the results were inconsistent at best. Radar technology lagged far behind Allied systems, and most Japanese night fighters struggled to locate, let alone engage, high-flying Lightnings or their bomber escorts. Anti-aircraft artillery was similarly overhauled, with efforts to produce heavier flak guns capable of reaching P-38 altitudes. Yet, production bottlenecks, material shortages, and rushed training limited their impact. By the time these weapons reached the front, Allied tactics had already shifted, keeping Japan's defenses perpetually one step behind. Every adaptation came at great cost, resources drained, pilots sacrificed, defenses stretched thin. None reversed the tide. Against the P-38, Japan's countermeasures were little more than temporary patches on a widening wound. Instead of restoring balance, these desperate measures highlighted the growing disparity between Japan's dwindling war machine and America's relentless industrial and technological momentum. The Lightning had forced Japan into a corner where sacrifice replaced strategy and survival became the only goal. The P-38 Lightning's legacy in the Pacific was far greater than its kill counts or tactical victories. To Japan, it became a symbol of a war they could not win. Every encounter with the twin-boom fighter reinforced the widening gulf between Japanese doctrine and American innovation. The very strengths Japan had relied upon, maneuverability, close-in dogfighting, and pilot skill, were rendered obsolete by a machine that rewrote the rules of aerial combat. The Lightning's impact was measured not only in the skies but also in strategy. Its long range allowed American planners to project power across the Pacific in ways previously impossible. Bombers no longer flew unescorted into danger. The P-38 flew beside them, ensuring missions reached their targets with devastating effect. Japanese commanders, once confident in their ability to bleed American raids, were forced to admit their defenses were crumbling. Perhaps most telling was the psychological weight it carried. Japanese pilots spoke of the frustration of chasing an enemy they could never catch, of being blasted apart by firepower they could not match. For civilians, the sight of P-38s escorting bombers overhead symbolized the inevitability of Allied dominance. The Lightning was not just an aircraft, it was a message written across the sky. America would not be stopped. Its role in key victories cemented its place in history. From Guadalcanal to the Philippines, the Lightning cleared the path for advancing forces. It was the aircraft that gave Allied bombers teeth, the plane that secured air superiority over vast oceanic expanses. Its versatility, serving as fighter, interceptor, reconnaissance platform, and even ground attacker, proved the adaptability of American design philosophy. For Japan, the P-38's legacy was bitter. It revealed that valor and sacrifice, no matter how deeply ingrained in doctrine, could not stand against industrial power and technological innovation. Every desperate countermeasure, ramming attacks, night intercepts, new aircraft rushed into service, only delayed the inevitable. The Lightning embodied the future, and Japan was trapped in the past. In the end, the P-38 was remembered not only as a weapon of war, but as a herald of change. It showed that wars would be decided not by turning duels and bravery alone, but by machines that extended reach, multiplied firepower, and redefined superiority. For Japan, the Lightning was the fighter they never wanted to face, and the one they could never forget. In the end, the P-38 Lightning was more than just an aircraft. It was a declaration of dominance in the skies. For Japan, it shattered illusions of invincibility and exposed the limits of outdated doctrine. For America, it proved the power of innovation, range, and overwhelming firepower. Every gleaming silhouette of the twin-boom Predator carried the message that the tide of war had turned. Even today, the Lightning's legacy endures as a symbol of air superiority, engineering brilliance, and the fighter Japan never wanted to face.